Scene is a youth subculture that evolved from emo in the mid to late 2000s. Members of the subculture were typically referred to as scene kids, but scene kids with large online followings were also referred to as scene queens. Their fashion involved brightly colored hair, heavy eyeliner, skinny jeans, band tees, and candy bracelets. Scene was one of the last American subcultures to emerge outside of the internet, but it later grew because of the popularity of scene queens on MySpace. It got to experience both worlds and sometimes the worst of what both had to offer.
Yeah. I feel like we're just getting far enough from scene to where we can study it. Because this is like, feels like every old YouTube video I watch from this is like, 15 years old, like kind of on the dot almost.
Yeah. It's a very interesting subculture. Even if you weren't part of it, everyone has memories of like the scene kids in their school.
Yeah, it was like remarkably well spread, I would say. And I think it also like, I had sent you a photo earlier, but like some cringe photos of me from early high school, late middle school, like you could never call me a scene kid, like, but my hair was swoopy, my jeans were black and tight. Yeah.
You were getting much closer to the aesthetic than I did. The closest I got, I guess, was when I had a phase where I wore neon pants from American Apparel. I had colors like lavender and aquamint.
Yeah.
Yeah, peacock.
Yeah, that's getting pretty close.
Yeah. But I wanted to start out the episode by, discussing this idea that scene was the last traditional or pre-internet subculture. Because, before scene, subcultures, they started in real life. They had gatekeeping mechanisms. And what the internet did was it allowed people to start to get famous just from matching the image of a subculture and aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It got to kind of like develop and kind of codify what it looks like before internet intervention. It's hard to like identify any visual differences like in the internet era of scene, other than maybe it made it more dramatic. If you think like if the great like mirror that is the internet as we hold it to ourselves, like that it just keeps on kind of reinforcing patterns.
But why was it that like traditional subculture started to disappear? I think it goes back to what I call the 2007, 2008 vibe shift. So across my entire life, the most drastic cultural change I have seen occurred around this year. That was due to both the Great Recession and the emergence of social media. Other generations like the boomers, 1969 stands out to them. I've heard other people suggest other years like 2015, but this to me is like the biggest shift I've seen.
Yeah, such a 1-2 punch. And they're like, I guess they're technically unrelated, like the growth of social media and then the Great Recession. The Great Recession is just like a global economic phenomenon. Like, I guess it was in a lot of senses bound to happen. And I guess social media blowing up was also bound to happen. But them kind of landing within that same kind of 2-year span really did a number on us.
Yeah, I mean, another cultural consequence, like rock music being such a big genre, started to have less cultural capital. And this was the last sort of subculture to come out of the punk or the rock tradition.
Yeah, and it just feels so like, I mean, rock is always changing. Like 70s classic rock feels so different from like 1950s, like Buddy Holly, Gee Whiz kind of stuff. But this, if you took that like a same 20-year span, like scene music and like metalcore, crunkcore, and all that stuff just seems like worlds different from what was happening, I guess, 20 years earlier, like in the late 80s. I mean, you can see some antecedents and stuff like glam rock and hair metal, but like this is just a different beast. Like,
yeah. The earliest example I can think of like a rock group sort of mirroring the scene aesthetic is Strawberry Switchblade. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
They were from the 80s, but they teased out their hair to the point where it's super voluminous. They don't really start to look like anime characters in the same way, but it's the closest I can think of.
Yeah, it's just more of a general explosion as opposed to like a multi-layered kind of fractal design.
Yeah.
I think what also stands out about scene, like what makes it seem so crazy now, is how like deeply sincere it was. I think maybe more so with like emo, that side of it. But I think that maybe this happened around 2008 or afterwards. But like, I think we just have a more cringe sensitive and maybe like not irony poisoned, but like, I don't know. It just seems too sincere for the current environment.
Yeah.
It's like how themed like restaurants died out. It feels like it's from the same source. Rainforest Cafe and Scene Kids come from the same cultural source is what I'm completely freewheeling right now.
Yeah. I mean, with Scene Kids, like we watched tons of videos this week. The way they talked was just so obscene, but they were so committed to just being outrageous and like using swear words and being kind of like politically incorrect.
Yeah. They were just like, very brash. And just like once you kind of dispensed with how you should dress, it's like, might as well throw it all out the window. Like, it's also that thing like, if I'm going to get clowned on anyway, like you kind of just throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Because it also did dabble in like LOL so random humor, which, modern teenagers are really not willing to touch.
Yeah. I was thinking about like what other cultural currents are happening at the same time, even that we've just covered, because like in this span of like late 2000, like that we're coming off of McBling, if you think about it, if this was starting in the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, to connect it into like the sort of subcultures we've talked about in other episodes, I think this precedes Witch House. Witch House was the first internet subculture. Then it was C-punk, vaporwave, health goth, and then normcore. Normcore, we were almost going to do an episode on it this week. I don't know if we ever will, just because like it really corrupted what the idea of an internet subculture was. But I don't know, that might be better as an article or something.
There's also overlaps with the metrosexual in a way too. Everyone's pants were getting skinnier, but there was a subset that was going even skinnier.
Yeah. You know what I realized about skinny jeans? For the longest time, I really thought that it was just a natural reversal of the baggy pants trend because that was a thing in the 2000s. But it was also like people were idolizing being skinny, including scene queens.
Yeah.
And so like that was a way to flex how thin you were and then make yourself look thinner. Some people are listening are probably like, duh, but for me, I really always did think it was just like the opposite of baggy pants.
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like it took a little bit of lag because everyone remembers like 90s modeling for being like heroin chic skinny. But it took until the 2000s to get the pants skinny as well too. And yeah, I was kind of mentioning like hair metal and glam rock earlier, and they had skinny pants, but they were almost exclusively leather. Every time. Yeah. It felt like the skinny jean took a while. I was actually reading an article by Derek Guy, like menswear guy, and he was saying that like skinny jeans were a little bit top down as a fashion trend, meaning that they came from like the fashion establishment and runway stuff, like designers like Hedi Slimane and stuff, which were kind of like rebelling against. He says they're rebelling against the kind of like 80s and 90s like loose fit yuppie stuff, but it feels like that was really far apart. It felt like if they were rebelling against it, they took their time.
Yeah. So where did Scene Kids first emerge?
So I have a weird kind of theory on this. I'm not going to speak to like the origins of it because I do think it comes out of like way back. It comes from punk, which then became like emo and hardcore music, and then emo became scene. That seems to be the roughly agreed upon kind of origins of this. And then any more detail than that, you just end up naming bands, and they have crazy names, and they're always like 3 words long, so I'm not about to be doing that. But I think from growing up in Las Vegas, I think there's a uniquely kind of Sunbelt angle to Scene Kids, like a Sunbelt suburbia thing.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at Google Trends, as I do with most topics, and I found that, since they started collecting data in 2004, 3 of the 4 states where it has the largest search volume are Sunbelt states. So Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. So it lines up with what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think maybe, subcultures are more often generated in city areas like, punk music in the 70s and 80s. But I think that this just spread so diffusely thanks to the internet. And I think that it's kind of its ethos and morals of being the outsider, being the weirdo. That's kind of more an emo, but it stays throughout scene, just in a more aggressive and brash way. I think that really appeals to people kind of dealing with being a kid in the suburbs and feeling weird. Not that kids in the city don't feel weird and alienated and go through the same stuff, but I think this is like uniquely suited to kids like me who grew up in samey stucco houses and couldn't do anything if you can't drive. And because some of these videos of Scene Kids, they're like hanging out after school. Just like on, and the schools look just like mine in Las Vegas, where it's just these like cinder block, concrete masonry unit outsides, and there's just like your scrappy landscaping. You're sitting there in the shade in your black skinny jeans, trying not to sweat.
Oh yeah, I mean, we made a Scene Kids Pinterest board, and pretty much every image on there, I can't think of one that like reads as urban. It is largely a suburban phenomenon.
Yeah. And there's also videos of kids just like walking, like not on highway medians, but like in Strody type environments, like hanging out like in a strip mall 7-Eleven or like a drive up one. Yeah, it's just kind of like hanging with your friends and trying to make some kind of fun space out of a place that's just not, it's not built for anyone. It's not built for any person. It's built for cars, and it's definitely not built for scene kids.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how much of it is a reaction against the suburban built environment and how much of it is like, I hate my mom energy.
Yeah, it's like, it is. I think subcultures can vary in exactly how youth locked they are.
Yes.
And I think this is extremely youth locked. Like it's hard to even hit your mid-20s in this.
Yeah, no, I mean, the biggest like scene queens, which we'll talk about eventually, like Kiki Cannibal was big at like 14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like when people look back on things like indie sleaze, like that had a decent age range. I'd say it kind of had a firm age bottom. I think you had to be, it was all about moving to New York, you know. And
you had to be able to get into the club, or you had to have had a fake ID.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like at least a firm 18 at the bottom, and then kind of like diminishing through your 20s.
Yeah. But in the I hate my mom discussion, I'm kind of just as interested in the parents that allowed their kids to be seen as I am the scene kids themselves. Yeah. There's no way to really explore that. But like, I think that might have maybe come out of just how parents became more permissive after the tough love parenting style of the 90s. Yeah. It started to be like your standard that you were judged by as a parent was, are you like doing everything you can to make sure your child is happy? Like that was how you were judged if you were a good parent or not. So if your kid wanted to dress a certain way, that was maybe like what they thought they should be doing.
Yeah, I think I think that always swings back and forth, like the permissibility of parenting. And yeah, I can picture a very just like well-mannered suburban mom, like taking their kid who just looks insane and took an hour to do their makeup
in the back seat.
Yeah, and they're just like, this is fine. It's so happy we're doing something together. Like, yeah. At the Copenhagen episode, I mentioned about how like I had seen like a kind of gothy kid hanging out with his parent, but like he seemed to be having a good time actually, because there's just, I think this like I hate my mom thing is connected to the kind of like urbanist angle of scene kids, which is when you're in these like outer ring suburbs that are just so focused on like, I moved here for the schools. I moved here because it's newer and nicer. Like if anything is going wrong, like your kid is becoming weird and alternative and falling in with the wrong crowd, like I think it's doubly stressful for the parent because it's like you made every correct move. You know, you moved to the good school district. You bought a big house. Why is your kid looking like this? Like it's not even. It's like because you kind of moved away from the kind of urban contamination. You know, it's like, oh, I don't want my kids falling with the wrong crowd at a city school. And then you move to the suburbs and they went on the wrong part of the internet. And now their name is like Insane Ian or Ian Insane.
Yeah, you might have been able to protect them from who they were physically hanging out with, but parents didn't know how to protect their children from who they were interacting with online. And pretty much every famous scene kid I read about like was subjected to online bullying. It was pretty much guaranteed after a certain number of MySpace friends you had.
Yeah, and it's also like a weird kind of like, they'll often have a story about like, oh yeah, I was bullied in school for looking different, so my parents pulled me out of school and I went online more. And it's like, no, like that's how it gets worse. Like,
yeah. I mean, I feel like with scene kids and historical reenactors, goths, like people who are of like a certain caliber of like extreme with how they dress, they're often painfully quiet. I think there's something subconscious going on where they want to, you know, they want attention, which sounds basic, but like they're not able to speak for themselves. So they're just sort of attracting, you know, comments and getting attention that way.
That's yeah. And it's very like jarring with scene kids because of how crazy the look is. Like to dress that crazy and be like, no, I'm actually kind of shy. It's just very funny. Like it even makes more sense with goths if you're like a more like subtle retreated goth or emo, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when I think of like scene kid personalities, I think of Jeffree Star, and there's like this TikTok account I'll link where it's like F yeah 2012, and like every single one of them is just like a scene kid like making threats.
Yeah. It's kind of like Boxy who we were talking about.
Yeah.
Also like her whole weird like idiolect mannerisms that are like developed kind of in a cave almost in a sense of not going outside. Yeah. Yeah. And so on that kind of being different and being bullied, also, my weird take on scene kids is that I don't really remember them being like that. I remember my school was weird. It was a very like high achieving academically school. So I think we had popular kids, kind of. They were like the student council. It was kind of like the nerds were on top, I guess.
Yeah.
But we had these like cool bad kids who for some reason were at this good school. And they all dressed kind of scene-esque, I would say. They were called like, I don't know, people would say like, oh yeah, there's like the sketchy guys, like the sleazy guys.
Wait, were they not actual scene kids?
That's why I'm kind of like hemming and hawing a bit. But they seemed like closer than the average kid to it. So it just kind of felt like in Las Vegas, like things were so broadly alternative growing up. Like that felt like the main thing. Like kids were variations of like wearing black and band tees. And like the biggest thing all year was going to Warped Tour. It felt like that was the main monoculture.
Yeah.
Because just Las Vegas, like, I don't know, maybe if I went to like, there was like a nice side of town with like a local school. And I noticed those kids were different. Like those kids seemed a little more like kind of like basic, clean cut. So maybe that was more like a typical American high school, and I just got a weird one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't find it that hard to believe. Like you mentioned to me that like people will not believe you sometimes. And this is like something where it's like, why would you waste your time doubting it?
Why would I lie about the scene kids being popular at my school? Yeah, it'd be a strange thing. I mean, I'm just thinking that maybe I'm misremembering it or something. Because as I said, yeah, I dressed kind of like lightly, like scene adjacent. Like it just, as we always say with subcultures, it bleeds into the mainstream in some ways, either after its zenith or kind of during it. But then in later high school, I kind of dressed a little more like twee, indie, vintage, a little preppy. I remember getting some like flack for that from people in the black skinny jeans, you know?
Yeah. I mean, in my school, it wasn't the case that there were a ton of scene kids and they were the most popular. There were a few, and they were on the popular side. But my high school was also very nerdy. And we also had like, you know, because of that constraint, like it was sort of interesting who ended up being the most popular. Like we didn't have a football team.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the swim team was full of like all the jocks, like all the hot guys, all the hot girls.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That just feels like, yeah, there's like a latent need to have popular athletes. And if you just take away the conventional sports, like something will pitch it and something will fill the need.
Something will fill it. But yeah, in my high school, I think I did mention this in another episode, but there was like one guy, maybe 2 years above me, who graduated with scene hair. He was seen the whole time, I think. And then there was a girl who started freshman year looking particularly seen. She would wear those animal hats, also called spirit hoods. And she would wear candy bracelets. She had black hair that naturally, I think she was Russian. She would definitely straighten it, but it was not like teased to a certain degree. But yeah, those were the only two I could think of. Although I did remember a third one. Yeah, but there weren't that many.
Yeah, our high school years of 2010 to 2014, like pretty perfectly overlap with. Yeah. I mean, what do we call the zenith of scene kids? Was it 2010? That account was
I think it peaked
2012.
in 2009, technically. Oh. Yeah, so a year before I started high school.
Interesting. Yeah, it does feel like a late middle school thing as well.
Yeah. And so I want to just make a little bit of a distinction between emo and scene, or discuss how they were related, but not go too much into it, because I think that they have a fair amount of overlap. I don't think either would have been especially offended if you mislabeled them, even though they would, gravitate towards one over the other. But like some ways to differentiate them, emo kids were more black. They idolized being depressed more. They engaged in cutting more often. And also their hairstyles, typically their bangs would cover their eyes to a more like obscene degree.
Both eyes.
Yes,
yeah, it's kind
eyes.
of both. It feels like you should have some kind of heuristic or rhyme to remember. If you see one eye, scene, two eyes, emo.
Yeah.
I feel like emo is hard to pin down, because specifically like the music genre, no one wants to be called it. Even the bands that everyone have agreed upon are like emo bands. They'll always like. I was reading the Wikipedia article about like emo music, and it was saying like Taking Back Sunday, Rites of Spring, and A Fire Inside. Like they had interviews with each of their like band members, like, we are not emo, we are X. Like someone was saying like, oh, we're rock, we are a rock band, and someone else is like, oh, we're hardcore, or we're post-hardcore. But yeah, so there's always this kind of interplay between like the music and then the actual culture around it. And we should say that like scene comes from the music scene, basically. So I guess it would have been like the kind of, am I reaching too far here? It's the emo music scene birthed the scene.
You're talking about the etymology?
Yeah.
I think the etymology of scene, it came from the term scene queen. Scene queen came first, and it referred to girls who would go to shows, hardcore shows, And it was sort of analogous to groupie in a way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you're just like hanging around because you think these guys are hot. You even like the music.
Yeah.
And then it got co-opted and became its own subculture.
I think it might be a little more like scene queen and scene like a divergent evolution off of that. But I don't know. Maybe. But the queens were so powerful. They were so important in moving it forward.
Yeah. No, everyone involved in scene would be labeled a scene kid.
Yeah.
And then there were way more scene queens than scene kings. There technically were scene kings, but that was just like, it's almost like in, are you familiar at all with the voguing subculture?
I am not. Can't say I am. But
well, it's like once you get the title of legendary, it's like you really have to work for it.
Yeah. It's funny. Like even in these like alternative and more amorphous subcultures, people still have a desire to like achieve formalized rankings and things, you know? I guess in this way, voguing is like being a Freemason or a member of an Elks Lodge, that you want to be like an 8th degree or whatever it is.
Yeah, because that emerged before the internet. It's much more organized than any like internet subculture today.
Yeah, formalized.
Yeah. And now I think we can go into the elements of scene fashion. So for this, I just want to give one shout out because there's this really great YouTuber, Saoirse. Saoirse. Okay. It's hard to say it, but
Saoirse.
She has like a couple of videos on scene fashion and history, and it's just so pleasant. Like she speaks in kind of like a slow way, but I have no desire to like speed it up.
Yeah, she has a very mild Southern accent, and I find those very comforting.
Yeah, like you could see her being a mom, but instead she's like a elder scene queen.
Yeah. No, and she really lived through it, and she like, oh, poor thing. Like what these girls do to their hair, or guys too, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they always talk about how like OG scene kids will give advice to scene kids on like, say, the scene kids subreddit. They'll like just say like, no, don't be too sad that you missed out because it was very toxic, and also like everyone fried their hair. Like you guys know better. You know what Lux Maxing is.
We have better hair technology now. Everyone has Korean skincare. Like we're good now.
Yeah. And on hair, that's the most important element, actually. You know, they would do things like bleach it, dye it, straighten it, tease it, add extensions, add hair accessories like bows. Again, it got so extreme to the point that like many of them resembled anime characters, kind of.
Yeah. Some places point to like the origin of the scene haircut being the bassist for this band, 18 Visions. So his name is Javier Van Huss. Kind of a crazy name.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, it's his real name. I Googled him, and I don't know if he's still playing music, but he is a practicing hairstylist in South Bay, LA area. But it's very funny to get into the scene like for the music and to actually be able to play an instrument and then realize like it was the hair the whole time that was the real appeal.
Yeah. I mean, the scene queens who got famous on YouTube for all of their hair tutorial videos, like they learned all the ins and outs of hair, like how to hit every angle, how to dye it in every single way. Like one in particular that really like stands out to me is Ambre is Dead. Her real name is Amber. But she like, I mean, she had every hairstyle imaginable. Like on the Pinterest board, there's like her with like split pink and yellow hair. She has like a cheetah stripe that will be the artwork for this episode.
Yeah, the cheetah stripe blew my mind because you see a lot of the like coontail design, as they call it, but no, it feels like she moved
Next
beyond
level.
that. Yeah. And in her videos, she just, I mean, everyone kind of looks like this, I think, when they're like doing their hair, but she's just so focused. Like she's so locked in. I really respect it.
Yeah. I mean, this was pre-brain rot, so they had a little bit more attention than most people online now.
Yeah, you can just tell. Like, I mean, she's also dealing with like intensive chemicals and stuff. Like she's appropriately focused.
Yeah. Like seeing it was one big cottage industry to like teach each other how to like do their hair.
And it was like, coming from like there wasn't an established way to do this with your hair. You couldn't go to school for this. Like it was like it had to be grassroots. No one had done this before.
Yeah, and one more thing on hair, there's this like TikTok video I couldn't find, but it's of like a scene kid, and they start to like pan the camera back until you almost see the back of their head, but they like are like no. Like it's like
yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, they often you don't see the back of the head.
It apparently looks really bad.
Like, how do you like with all that going on in the front? Like, how do you follow that? Like, how do you? It's like a regular.
Yeah, it's all about that one angle you're trying to hit.
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me actually of like Diglett, because apparently Diglett has feet, but like Pokemon will never show you.
They will never show you the feet. That's great. Oh, another important use of a scene girl's hair is to pull it across your face and make a mustache with it. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Very
got
key.
into that like twee territory a bit. Like
Yeah.
there's a video of Amber is Dead where like she sharpied on a mustache under her finger and she's doing the like mustache thing.
Yeah,
on
we'll
her
talk
lip.
about it later, but yeah, that's kind of what follows this in some ways for some people. Yeah, is the kind of indie mustache on the finger type beat.
Yeah. And then the next element of seeing kid fashion makeup, we were actually having like a bit of a playful discussion before this because we were like, okay, they put all this stuff on their face, but we don't even know what it is.
Yeah, you guys are just gonna be patient with us here. Like, we're just gonna have to lean on the listener and be like, you know what the makeup looks like. They got dark eyeliner, and I believe it's on top and the bottom.
I mean,
of the
I watched
eye.
a video where like Amber was showing people how she does her makeup. And to me, it looks like she just takes like an eyeliner pen, puts it straight on her eyelid, turns her entire eyelid black.
Yes.
And like that's how she starts.
Yeah. Start from there, and then
Yeah.
there was broadly kind of a push for like pale foundation. I'm going to say tepidly, timidly, and then you have to have your eyes like as dark as possible. And a winged eyeliner. I think this was maybe one of the origins of winged eyeliner.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
I've never watched like
is.
makeup tutorials.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're not a Jeffree Star type guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe I've watched a Chris Crocker one or two, but yeah, my interest in like gay content creation does end with makeup. I don't really want to watch like James Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of like clothing that they would wear for tops, it actually usually wasn't very on brand. Like people have this misconception in their reinterpretation, which we'll get to with like seen on TikTok, but it actually usually was like stuff that you would get from like regular stores in the mall. But if you would have like a few like very cherished band t-shirts that like were typically black, but they had very neon colors.
Yeah. Like broadly with this style, like it does use kind of a black base for it. Like the skinny jeans and the shirt, and then it was really leaning more on the accessories. Sometimes you would have like a neon crazy colored shirt, and also like the skinny jeans weren't a hard and fast rule either.
It was for guys, I would say, though.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't see them in shorts.
No, true.
But for girls, they could wear things like skirts and dresses. They would wear those on occasion. But like I feel like part of the reason why they didn't have as many band t-shirts was just, again, because this was the Great Recession.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford like a full like head to toe Gur ensemble.
Yeah, it was. I remember one of the videos I watched, this girl was like my whole outfit in this video is $20. She said like a lot of these accessories, like the candy bracelets, which I didn't realize are spelled Kandi. Like it doesn't
very
matter,
silly.
I guess. But yeah, and then necklaces made out of energy drink pop tabs.
Yeah. That was such a thing though, just for teenagers to do. I imagine some are still kind of like this, but when you get really into a brand, you collect the things that aren't supposed to be the product. Like for example, I would collect like my American Apparel bags and like store them, even though I didn't have any use for them. But I would know like other teenagers that were really into shopping, they'd like pin the bags up on their walls from like every store they like.
Interesting. I remember, the Abercrombie bags were very powerful at a time.
But Scene Kids were kind of like this, where they would collect either the pop tabs from the cans or the cans themselves. Like I had a friend in high school who was not quite a Scene Kid, but they would have like every Monster Energy can they ever drank like in a corner of the bedroom.
I remember Peace Tea was this brand of just like tea, kind of like Arizona green tea that was big. And my sister was like collecting every flavor, just like finished them and had them as a decoration. People love collecting the commercial detritus.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then facial piercings. So I actually saw like a modern day Scene Kid over the weekend on the train. And she had the double lower lip piercing, which is a snake bite. And the other type is the double upper, which is the angel bite.
Yeah. Snake bites were more common though than angel bites.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think for guys, I mean, there were studs across the board. I think I saw more. Oh, this girl had loops on her rings, I guess. But yeah, there's also the cheek ones, whatever the hell those are called.
Dermals, right?
No.
Oh no. Okay.
Dermal's like the under skin. Subdermal?
Okay.
Those ones? I don't know. Yeah, we're obviously out of our depth on this one. Listen, it's a broad topic.
Yeah, but we do know that they had gauges. Gauges were big.
Yeah, man, that's so crazy. Because like, you can get tattoos removed. You know, but ears don't go back. I know there's like surgeries for it and stuff if you do like blow one out.
Yeah. Like Alice Pelle, she was like a Tumblr famous person back in the day, but she had gauges. And then I remember like seeing her on Instagram, like announcing that she was like cutting off her earlobes and she did. But that's how you have to get rid of them because she had really big ones. They were stretched like halfway down her neck.
Those were everywhere in Las Vegas. Yeah, my sister started like gauging a little bit, and that was a big topic of discussion in the house. Let me tell you, there's always the little like conical ones, kind of. Oh, jeez,
I've never liked them personally.
No, and everyone like I feel like the oft repeated thing, which is I just got to be true if everyone say it, they smell bad. Apparently,
yeah.
But,
and then another like scene element. Okay, cartoon characters. These included things like Invader Zim and Hello Kitty. But this is one way that Scene Kids were very modern, which is a fun way to think about them, but I think it's true because they were amongst the first people to carry interest from childhood straight into adulthood. They never stopped. Before this, like people really wouldn't do that. Although there was this like general 2000s trend of like cartoon characters in streetwear. Like think about the like Thug Life SpongeBob t-shirts and then like Looney
Bugs
Tunes
Bunny
jean
and
jackets.
all that. Yeah. So yeah, they weren't. This is one of the few ways they weren't weird, like broadly. But yeah, and then also with children's entertainment and stuff in the late scene era, like into the kind of Tumblr indie twee thing. You have like Adventure Time and regular show. Those like Cartoon Network shows that were kind of straddling kids entertainment and then like late up until late high school.
I loved the like that. I guess was probably like Cartoon Network's. I don't know how many golden ages they've had, but that was their most recent one. Yeah, Adventure Time, Steven Universe. There were some really good shows that came out.
Flapjack.
Oh yeah,
I feel like that's often omitted from them, but I was a Flapjack.
That was the first good one.
Yeah, I was a Flapjack enjoyer. Yeah, the whole vibe of that one is kind of like 2010s nautical or whatever, like a sailor mustache.
Yeah, that was like first wave hipster aesthetic.
It kind of looks like the Neutral Milk Hotel like album cover in a way, but that's from like turn of the century.
Yeah.
And
then one more thing on cartoon characters, Gur was the most popular then and the most popular now because Scene Kids were kind of performatively hyperactive in the way that emo kids were performatively sad. Like they would drink those energy drinks and then like bounce up and down.
Yeah, I remember that like, oh, sorry, I'm all hyper right now.
Yeah. You can see that in like the videos that still remain on YouTube of Scene Kids in their heyday. They did try to act that way.
Yeah.
So now I think we can start to talk about Scene Queens.
Yeah, there's there's a lot out there. It feels like this, like extended universe of Scene Queens. I don't know. This is hard to like read about, so I just put on some YouTube videos by the gay Slavic YouTuber Vitaly Space, and he really breaks it down well. So hats off to that guy. Yeah,
I watched a few of his too, but I do not like his voice.
It's very put on, I will say.
Yeah, but you know, Scene Queens, they were the girls and women who got famous on sites like MySpace and VampireFreaks.com. And they were sort of like influencer pioneers. Like they started to do things like live stream on Stickcam and other websites.
Yeah. I didn't really realize that live streaming had this like initial birth because I feel like it went down after this period, actually, before then the ascendancy of like streamers as we know them now and stuff like Twitch.
Yeah. I never watched it either, but I remember it used to be like kind of sus if someone had a webcam.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. It's like if you're a kid, like you're not using it for business calls. So like, what are you doing with that?
Yeah. But yeah, Scene Queens, all Scene Kids did this, but they typically had names that were this formula where their first name would either be their first name or a nickname. The scene last name, it would then be a made up word that was meant to be a bit shocking, like suicide, slaughter, gore, etc.
Like Kiki Cannibal, Vanna Venom, Brukel Bones. I saw that. That's a fun little pun there. Would you be Nathan Nightmare? What would you be, Nathan? Your Scene Kid name.
I don't like that. That would be fine. I wouldn't want anything that was too homicidal.
Yeah, you wouldn't want anything too much more than that. I feel like that's nice and vague for you. I think Jay is a rough one. I don't know what mine would be.
Yeah, Joseph Javelin maybe.
Yeah. I put that one in there, but I'm like, that's too like militaristic. Like it just has to be like vaguely menacing.
Yeah. But I feel like these names, they kind of show how much Scene has changed, you know, compared to where it is with Zoomers now, because those words like suicide they bleep them out now if they talk about these OG scene kids like Zoe's, maybe it's Zoe's Suicide, but yeah, like they won't even be able to say her last name because of how like the TikTok algorithms work.
Yeah. It's just, it reminds me of how much like crazier and Wild West the earlier era of the internet was.
Yeah. But no, if I was a scene kid, I would probably try to have a name that wasn't as out there, because there are like, you know, Jeffree Star or Leda Monster Bunny. You could have things that weren't as like crazy.
Amore Hilton was one of those.
Yeah. But one of them, you know, Kiki Cannibal, I want to go in depth with her a little bit, because she's, by some standards, by some people's opinion, she's the biggest scene queen. And I actually knew about her in high school because I read this like 2011 Rolling Stone article about her.
Yeah, I couldn't get access to the article in the Rolling Stone. I think it's kind of a rag, honestly. I don't like that magazine. But I watched a summary of it. And yeah, this is like the most cautionary tale, I would say.
Yeah. And before we get into her life, like what was she big for? How did she contribute to scene as a subculture? She was the one who sort of pioneered the cartoon characters element. She was like the first to do that. And then she also has this like necklace that she mass produced. Like she figured out one way for her to monetize off of her early internet fame, because people still were figuring out how you did that.
Yeah.
But she was a jeweler and she would make these like diamond necklaces.
Yeah, it's like it's actually in the shape of a diamond, which reminds me of like the Diamond Supply Co. tees and the kind of like later, I don't know, kind of streetwear hype beast era.
I remember
to follow
that brand.
this. But yeah, it feels like a little like connection between those two.
Yeah, it was like they were these pretty big necklaces. They kind of look more blog house indie sleeves to me, but I can see how they still fit in with scene.
Yeah, it all connects.
And there are pictures of other scene kids wearing them. Like she did make it a thing. So how did she like get into scene in the first place? The article, it offers a good starting point. You know, she was a girl who adored punky scene kid fashion. Kiki began filling her MySpace with pouty photos of herself in heavy makeup and crop tops, adopting a persona as brash and outrageous as the real Kirsten was awkward and insecure. So they touch on how, like, for her, this was sort of how I was saying, where it's like, for whatever reason, painfully shy kids oftentimes dress the most extreme.
Yeah. I also read in it that she was from Chicago. Her family moved from Chicago to Florida.
I think it was just Illinois. I don't know if it was within the Chicagoland area.
Yes.
Yeah. But the reason her family moved to Florida is kind of interesting. The article says her mom, you know, they kind of pictured it as being like a vacation in a way. And they get there, it's boring and not perfect, and their daughter gets bullied in school.
Yeah, this kind of fits into like my kind of thesis about the Midwestern emigre, the Midwesterners who came to Las Vegas. It seemed like they were just seeking like the story we tell in America is like immigrants came here seeking a better life, and it felt like people came to Las Vegas were just seeking an easier life, like not to make more, but just like I want to do less. I want to get more for the same amount or less of work, and I want it to be warm all the time and nothing to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, and their daughter's lifestyle did make a lot of work for them. A lot of people question, you know, like, because she got severely online bullied, like, to a pretty extreme degree. Like, the article from Rolling Stone, it has all of these, like, quotes I don't want to read off because they're really not nice. But it's like, why would her parents do this? For her, on a personal note, Kiki, she wanted to stay online in order to, like, you know, prove to her haters, like, their words can't hurt her. Like, it was some big thing to prove to herself. But for her parents, like, it does beg the question, like, okay, people are literally showing up to your house. They're like spray painting words on it and like threatening you. Like, why do you not just like take away your daughter's computer?
Yeah, that always seems like stop looking at the computer. Yeah, I guess maybe it's that permissiveness thing. But yeah, Kiki is a case like what I talked about more generally of like pulling your scene kid out of school because they're getting bullied and then them just like being absorbed into the online world.
Yeah. She did literally get pulled out of school because she and her brother started to be like homeschooled.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So she had all day to do this, which is how she ended up like accepting, you know, like 25,000 friend requests on MySpace in 3 months.
Yeah, these numbers are crazy. Because also like the internet was smaller, but it was less people on it. So yeah, like driving those kind of numbers is just insane.
Yeah.
It's also just like these social media sites at the time are so different from what they're not these like entrenched hegemonies that we have now where like all these professionals are running it. Like what was the office of MySpace like in 2008? You know, it must have been pretty like ramshackle,
Yeah.
I'm imagining.
For some reason, I'm like, it can't have been in California. It's too lame for that.
In some like sad office park in the far reaches of California.
Like Virginia
maybe.
Beach or something. Yeah. And
Um,
then the story of Kiki, it ends in a really crazy way. So another way that scene sort of had the worst of both worlds is like there was predatory behavior both online and real life. And it was sort of normalized for like guys in their early 20s to date girls below 18. In Kiki's case, she was 14 years old dating a guy who was like above 18. His name was like Danny Cespedes or Mr. MySpace.
Yeah, Mr. MySpace. Like not even having like a scene name, like just going straight to that. Yeah, he was like he had lots of victims, and she was apparently the fourth out of 18.
Yeah. She only figured that out later, and then authorities got involved. They were in the midst of like arresting him to then charge him with like statutory rape and other charges, but he got away from the police, jumped over a pedestrian bridge, landed on the cement, and then died 2 months later.
Yeah, after going into a coma. It's insane. I didn't like think in this whole like story, I didn't think anyone died because of Scene Kid stuff. Because
Yeah.
like while they were into like drinking and partying and all that stuff, like, it didn't seem like a very like a high mortality rate type like subculture. You know, they weren't riding motorcycles at high speeds or something.
Yeah, I think Scene Kids, overall, they had fun, you know, but the ones who got too famous and had online harassment, they were more likely to hurt themselves, if anything.
Yeah. It's also like in the emergence of the scene aesthetic, one of the things that comes up in observations of it is that it was bucking the kind of hyper masculinity of earlier waves of punk.
Yeah.
It was saying like, no, we can be androgynous. Like, we don't care if you're going to call us gay. Like, we're a different type of guy. And this is always just so saddening when it's like, we're a different type of guy, but like still predators. Like, it's just so disheartening that like I think every subculture in a way is a little bit utopian in the way that it thinks that it can create different rules and not be held to like the strictures and the pain that the mainstream causes, and then they just end up reenacting a lot of it. I think it's really sad. It's also that I've talked about this before, but like any kind of subculture that traffics in like violence and transgression, you know, like down to the names that people choose for themselves, and then in the subculture there is violence and transgression. Like it's just I don't know. I wish that would be more of a warning for people. Like I'm sure there were kids who had an amazing time as a scene kid and all that, but like it just feels like the ones at the top are having the worst time in a lot of ways. They're being chewed up and spat out by it.
Yeah, it's not to say that they didn't have any values. Like, for example, a lot of them supported To Write Love on Our Arms, which was a pro-mental health, like anti-bullying campaign. A lot of them also were pro-LGBT.
Yes.
At a time when it was like transgressive to be that way.
Yeah, we have to like put ourselves back in that headspace of like late 2000s. Like it was not like, you know, the politically safe thing to do. It was a very like unsafe thing to come out in favor of that.
Do you want to hear something?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was like, before I came out, you know, the internet as a gay kid, it's like you go on it and you see what other gay people look like and what they sound like. And I just remembered I would like look up, like I would Google like gay boyfriends or something. And then I'd always see like for like several pictures of like two emo boys kissing. That was such a thing. But yeah, on Pinterest, after a certain point, I started to get recommended those like very OG photos.
Oh my God, those very like locked memories. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh my God.
And then another like scene kid I want to talk about. We could have done like a whole section with like 5 of them, but we're only doing
again,
like
there's
2.
too many.
But yeah, there's Vena Venom, and I want to talk about her because when you Google scene kid, many of our listeners I bet actually have this image in our head, but it's this picture of her. She has a really big hairstyle. There's coontails. There's a pink stripe. She's doing this pose that's kind of like a mime.
Yeah. She's got both hands in front of her. And then she's, with her face, she's making this weird, like puckered, it's not quite the duck face that everyone knows from this era. But she's like making dimples, I think, out of her cheeks.
Yeah. I think it's really amusing. It kind of reminds me of the Paris Hilton Stop Being Poor meme.
Oh, yes. The Barbie stick arms. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not even about like the content of either, but the pose is doing half the work. It's half of the like, what are you doing, girl?
Yeah, it's like you can't do that pose for much longer. Like that looks painful. And then looking at this image again, I'm realizing that in the background is just like the vinyl siding of a house. Like, and that just brings back that kind of like banal suburbia of scene kid life. Like, they couldn't think of like at least goth kids would hang out in like drainage gutters and stuff to make their background a little more goth. Or like if there was an old church, they'd go and hang out there. But like scene kids didn't even try. They would just be like, all right, yeah, let's go like into our backyard and take photos of ourselves.
Yeah. And there's another small detail that I think is very revealing. On one of her palms, you can see that the pink hair dye she used to dye her hair.
Oh my God. It's so funny.
Yeah. And then one more note about Vein of Venom. This picture went viral back in the day too, because one of the earliest memes that I can recall, it's the scene wolf meme. It's a wolf with her hair.
Yeah, it's back in the days of image macro type memes.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of examples. Most of them are inappropriate, but one of them is like, Mom, I am my hair. Yeah. And then next, I think we can kind of get into scene music. But before we get into it, I think it's interesting to note another way that scene kids were sort of modern. And this is one of the ways they stopped resembling traditional subcultures as much, is that there wasn't gatekeeping around a singular musical style. Like they could listen to metal, emo, EDM, crunkcore. They could even maybe dabble in hip hop a bit. But yeah, it was much more expansive. Because before this, people forget, like in the 90s and before, it was normal for a teenager to be like, yeah, I only listen to punk. I only listen to goth music, XYZ.
Yeah, things were a lot more locked down. People weren't supposed to be wandering around genre-wise. Even genres going into like nightcore. I saw that one, which was kind of like sped up and like Japanese influence. Because there's a lot of like anime stuff going on with this too. Yeah, it was a pretty wide swath of things. And a lot of it is remembered through Warped Tour, which was actually like much earlier than Scene Kids. It's been going since the 80s. It's like the longest like kind of traveling festival. And unlike other music festivals nowadays, this is the same bands and they tour together. And then in a weird bit of happenstance, I was listening to this British fun fact podcast, No Such Thing as a Fish. And their fact was about one of the bands on Warped Tour would be the grill band, meaning they would grill for the other bands on there. And they were often like a very new small band. And so it's like, even if your music wasn't that good or if you didn't have enough recognition, you could get in by being the grill band. And then you're in. You're in Warped Tour and you'll still play a set.
Was that just in the beginning or like the whole run?
I'm wondering if that was maybe like in the beginning, more like punk ethos of it. Because I can't picture a scene kid operating a grill. Is what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. They're going to catch their hair on fire and it's full of so many chemicals.
Just imagine them doing those like awkward like ragdoll poses
with some tongs. It must have been a different era. No overlap in that. I have a confession.
Yes,
I went to Warped Tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a memory of going there. There's no way I paid for tickets. Like one thing, it was very affordable. That was something pretty democratic about it. I remember being in this very large park system in Las Vegas and going there with some kids. I remember like seeing weed for the first time, I want to say, and being around it and saying no to it, of course, as a good boy. But yeah, I didn't know any of the bands. I moshed. I remember that. Yeah, I'm sure I must have worn like a Metallica t-shirt or something, because that was the stuff I liked.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't dip into any of this, like definitely not crunkcore, but not even like metalcore or any of that. Like I just liked Metallica, not even other like adjacent metal bands.
Were they even playing? What? Metallica?
Oh no! Oh my God, that would be its own thing. No. They were not a part of this whole thing.
Yeah. And how old were you when you went?
I would have been like 13, 14, I would say. Yeah, it was like an all ages concert somehow. I don't know. Yeah. God, this is unlocking some memories for me. I definitely want to go back to.
I don't know much about it, but I did learn it ended in 2019. It's not a thing anymore.
They resuscitated it.
They did?
In like 2024.
Oh, cool.
I want to say. I wonder if they'll do it again. And then recently in Las Vegas, there was a concert called When We Were Young. There was a lot of bands who would have been on Warped Tour. It also had a little more of a pop punk angle. That was something that kind of happened in the last throes of Scene Kids as things went pop punk at the end. But so that also helps out my little like Southwestern thesis on Scene Kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's good you know a little bit more about rock music than me, because that for me, again, it's like one of my biggest blind spots. I really don't know the differences between most rock genres.
I think it's diminishing returns learning about all the ins and outs of those. Like I don't know, a lot of like the bands care about it more than the fans. Actually, I don't know if that's true because fans love to police genres too. Everyone loves to categorize.
Yeah. I do think though it's easy to define what crunkcore is.
Oh yeah. That one stands out from the rest of them. Because everything else is like pretty firmly in the rock tradition. Nightcore taking more electronic stuff, but crunkcore borrows from hip hop in the most horrifying way.
Yeah. It's the only example I can think of music outside of like straight up metal or screamo using screaming vocals. Because if you subtract those, it just sounds like maybe a hip hop song typically.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's like it's using like hip hop and synthesizers. Like it has the structure of a hip hop song, and then just every so often a guy will scream, like, and it's like not in the spots you'd expect him to. And then they're trying to. The thing is, the best example of this is the song "Freaks" with 2 X's by Broken Side. Which gets held up as like the worst song of all time. But interesting, like for their music video, they kind of used the visual language of hip hop, where you have like hot girls dancing around and there's like a car, and you're showing off your wealth. So they're doing that, but they're scene kids. And when they're dancing with the women, they also go into like the screaming chorus of it. So he's just screaming at a woman as she's like shaking her ass, which is really funny. And I don't know how the girls are not just like laughing really hard.
Yeah, they scream the word liar like 6 or 7 times in a row at one point.
Yeah, weirdly misogynistic lyrics in a lot of it. Like for, again, this like idea of like, oh, we're a different type of masculinity, but our songs are about like hating women.
Yeah. I mean, for people apparently in the other scenes that might show up to Warped Tour, other rock scenes, they were critical of Scene Kids in part because they idolized partying in this way that was foreign, and it was sort of coming out of hip hop more.
Yeah. We'll talk about the different kind of things that follow Scene Kids, but like the whole LMFAO deal seems to come out of this. It's like there's like some kind of tipping point where, all right, emo, black. Scene, black with neon accents, and then you lose the black at some point, and you just become like, I've seen it described as like party animal aesthetic, maybe the neon stuff, but I just think it's like LMFAO aesthetic basically.
Yeah. Or what was it? Was it Planet X? Was that the movie? They're like,
Project X.
Okay.
Yeah, just the kind of like early 2010s partying vibe.
Yeah, much more hedonistic than people remember. Yeah. And then another group that comes out of Scene, but it's not crunkcore, it's Millionaires. They, to me, they kind of sound more like Avenue D, if you remember them from Electroclash. They were that duo, these 2 women that would just talk about sex. And they're not singing, they're talking over the beats. And then Millionaires is very similar to that.
This feels like music made for gay guys.
No, this is not gay
you
guy
don't
music.
think so? I don't know. Who is this for then?
Yeah, I mean, I like how you described it, where you said it's like if an alien wrote a song about partying, it would sound like this.
Yeah,
and this
like,
is Alcohol by Millionaires.
Yeah, they have a song called Alcohol, and they talk about how fun it is to drink alcohol and get crazy. And it's like, we've been writing and singing songs about how fun it is to drink alcohol and get crazy, but none of them are like this direct about it. Like usually just like you use other terms for it. Like, I love to go crazy with my friends or
taking
something.
shots.
Yeah.
It's just so catchier weird ways to say it. Yeah. But in the group, there's only one member that I can say like looks Scene. The other 2, not really. That's Melissa Green. And her, it's like she just has what looks like her natural hair, but with a ton of extensions, and it's just like stacked on top in this way where I don't know how she's keeping it all up there.
She's got the bump it look.
Yeah, the bump it look.
It's funny how that's like an overlap between moms of this period as well. Like the Karen haircut as we picture.
And then, did you want to talk about Scene style outside of the USA at all?
I could have done more research on this, but basically, like in the same way that Scene style was kind of roughly codified pre-internet, and then it like hit the internet and like spread out to the farthest reaches of the most forgotten exurbs. It also reached like the third world as well. A lot of in Argentina, there were essentially Scene kids, and they were called Pokemons.
I've read about
because
them,
of their hair. Yeah, and there's not too much to write about them. Like there was the Chinese like shamate subculture, and they were really hated, but also for like class reasons. These were thought to be kids from the countryside, which is the worst thing you can be, I guess, in terms of being cool in China. But yeah, and so it's funny that like when it did hit worldwide, like it was doing the same thing in America. It was reaching these kind of culturally forgotten areas of countries. But I also did hilariously see in these Scene Kid video playlists that are surprisingly very like well stocked out on YouTube, there were like kids in like downtown, like some old small town in Germany. So like it's like beautiful urbanism and like cafes and a Gothic church, and there's like Scene Kids hanging out in the street. I'm like, you guys have all of this? It felt like in America, like Scene Kids would, like mess around and hang out in like a CVS parking lot or something. There's nothing to do. And it's like, you guys have like a great urban fabric. Like, why are you still doing this?
I mean, I like that they were able to have a group of friends who match the same aesthetic as them. Because like, again, that's part of why that like scene is more of a traditional subculture. It leans that way more than an internet one. Because for me, being a C-punk teen, there was one girl in my school who kind of was C-punk, but that was it, and I wasn't friends with her. Yeah. But you could still have like a group of friends that dress the same way as you.
Yeah, it's like, I've said that I don't really like, I'm not super interested in subcultures that are just people in their bedrooms. I like when they go out and do things, there's like some buy-in and there's like a level of friction you're overcoming there. But yeah, this has a foot in two different worlds.
Yeah. And so what exactly happened to scene? What's your thesis?
We always say that like subcultures often like melt into the mainstream. Like with hippies, it got kind of like sanitized into a kind of just like broad flower power type of look. But since they didn't really originate the skinny jeans, like it's hard to say that the primacy of skinny jeans that's only waning now is due to them. I don't really think that's the case. A lot of these genres kind of died out too. I mean, the kind of LMFAO thing, that felt like an extended kind of death rattle of this period. And nothing came downstream of that, I don't think, unless you can draw a through line from that to Brat, which feels like a stretch, and I'm not.
The only cultural mainstay I can really identify is just that Hot Topic got GER merchandise and never stopped selling it.
Yeah, they believed like this will come back, like this will be revived. I've read somewhere that like Post Malone's like early involvement in bands could be considered like scene adjacent. So in that way, he'd be like a scene survivor, someone who's adapted and overcome. But yeah, one scene queen that I look not super worth mentioning, Hannah Beth. She was just top of the line scene queen. She was friends with Jeffree Star, who was coming out of this era, and then she was like friend/enemy of Audrey Kitchening, another scene queen. But yeah, she's like still an influencer with an online presence now, but she's kind of adapted into just a very like bog standard Kardashian-esque like lip filler, dark hair, center part, Instagram baddie type of deal. And so like, I think for a lot of people, like the point was like the scene look or the alternative look. And I think to her, the point was being famous online. And whatever that like form takes, whatever the people want, like she will like mold, adapt, and deliver.
That's interesting because that reminds me how Amy in her Discord, in response to the historical dressing and reenactment episode, mentioned how a lot of people in that world, like I think it maybe even said the majority, they were former scene kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she's she's aware of them. They must also be posting online, and they must also still like, get a thrill out of people commenting or liking their stuff.
Yeah, and so for them, I think the appeal was dressing up. It was like collecting the stuff, putting together an outfit, and they kept doing that. I think, for this Hannah Beth girl, I think the appeal was getting followers, being looked at, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of former scene kids, they continued to be alternative. I found this like 2017 BuzzFeed article I'll link. There's like 23 examples of what they looked like then and now. But because this is from 2017, there's one really unfortunate example where someone's like after photo was of her with a 2017 Snapchat flower crown, and it's like she couldn't.
Will we ever learn? Will we ever learn? Yeah, you could do another check-in with them now and be like, oh my god, I was so cringe back then. But now I'm Scandinavian clean girl. And so it's like, no.
But yeah, I'd say the majority of people in that article still dye their hair or they have like piercings of some sort. They're none of them were seen by 2017, but some of them still looked a bit goth, I would say.
Yeah, some of the guys were still just like beardy kind of punk guys.
Yeah.
Like not long hair anymore. Instead it's like, short. But yeah, I think that, as I was saying, like this is a very like age-locked kind of aesthetic. There's not really an established way to age into it. And People were talking about this in the Discord of like, how do you dress as like an aging punk? Like, what do you wear? I think for guys, the blueprint's pretty easy because, I mean, just nowadays people just wear jeans and a t-shirt. So you just wear black jeans and a band t-shirt, and then you've done it. You're a gracefully aging male punk. But for girls, it's like, do I wear a band t-shirt, then toss a cardigan on it? like, what do I do here?
Yeah. No, I think that there are some aesthetics that you can carry with you your whole life, but there are others where it only feels appropriate when you're like coming of age more. And it appeals to like adolescent impulses more. Like I know the way I dressed, say in high school or early college, I wouldn't really want to dress that way ever again because I want to look more like a man. I don't want to look like a teenager.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about kind of like Ivy and trad style is that there's like, it's very established how you dress when you're a young person. You can wear like, loose Oxford cloth button downs and stuff. Like it's a college style. And then you can age into like wearing like dressy or kind of business stuff. And I feel the final thing is like when you're old, then you can start wearing hats and it looks good, but not earlier than that. Don't be popping the fedora before you're like,
you have to have a kid
70s. First. I think so. I think that's the rule.
Yeah.
But also I've heard somewhere, I need to actually find a source or something for this other than pure anecdotes, that this idea that with alternative subcultures, like you can't really age into them is a very American idea. Because like apparently French and Italian punks, like I guess their punk movement pulled in older people as well, or people who are already maybe in their late 20s or something. And the idea is like, no, you just keep dressing like this. Like maybe it's modified in some way. You get male pattern baldness. You can't pull off the mohawk anymore. Yeah. But like, why would you age out of that? I think in America, we just have a more like, no, you have to be an adult at some point.
Yeah.
We formalize it.
There's more like of a perception of upward mobility. People are willing to dress a certain way. Yeah. It's part of our social contract more so than other places.
Yeah. Maybe it's just because like with the strong social safety net of European countries, like you don't need to like jettison every part of yourself that isn't like marketable and useful to making money. You don't need to professionalize. You can just work a job and be a punk, make a little bit of money, still provide.
Yeah. And then I wanted to talk about like the scene kid resurgence on TikTok, which also gets called scene core. So as per usual, Google Trends was helpful for me figuring out like if this is happening again or not. And, between 2012 and 2019, scene as a word, scene kids as a word, dropped below 50% of search volume. And then starting in July 2022, it's been 75% or higher. So there's been this second wave. It is definitely a thing.
I think what kind of primed the pump for like scene coming back in some modified way was e-boys and e-girls, because that's something from around like 2019 through COVID.
Yeah.
As well. And so that's a style that like is a lot of dark things and moody and having hair in your face and having lots of accessories. In this case, it's not energy drink tabs. It's like wearing too many rings as a man. And I think also we're just getting kind of far enough from that now that we can start to actually like codify and understand that.
Yeah. Because I don't know if I have the same image in your head of what an e-boy or e-girl is. I've always just assumed it meant people interested in aesthetics as an umbrella term.
Oh, no.
Do you have a particular look you're thinking of?
Yeah. It's like guys, when even the guys have baggy sleeves, that's how you're entering like e-boy territory. There's also like the striped shirt was very big with guys. I think it did kind of rehash a lot of like emo and scene themes with no neon in there, but for the girl version of e-girl, I guess like the tantamount one is like Belle Delphine and those ones, and that was taking more of the kind of pastel goth Tumblr core thing, but just kind of turned into its own like streamer version of it.
Yeah, maybe I just think of it that way because it does sort of look like the modern interpretation of just a generic Tumblr girl. Yeah. And so to me, I've never seen it as being a distinct subculture. Really.
Yeah. But then like e-boys, I think, led the charge with like the baggying of pants that happened eventually that we're living in now.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, this requires further study. This requires like also more time in hindsight.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're in, I guess, in some corners of the internet in a scene revival.
Yeah, with scene core. So I really am not a fan of how Zoomers with every aesthetic, they put core on the end. They need to be more creative than that. With this, I kind of like it because it's not a one-to-one interpretation of scene. They have modified it quite a bit and it does not look the same.
It's useful. You can just like, instead of saying like second wave scene or scene revival, scene core, like it's easy.
Yeah. And you can tell from the name, like, who's been wearing this stuff. It's like younger Zoomers.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like, I like how it's been coined. It's a good term. I don't really like the fashion as much. And, I realized this is really helpful. Like, this is a very helpful term from the historical reenactment episode, but what a farb is, in their world, that's someone who's reenacting something, but not in an authentic way. And in this, I see a lot of farbs.
Yeah. They're missing the details.
Yeah.
And
it's not to say it's impossible, because like on McBling, we discovered Bronzed Up Brat that like, I posted the TikTok video. It's of this like woman who like she feels like she was taken straight out of a reality TV show, and she has the mannerisms of like a mid 2000s woman. But here I come to find like she's actually British. Like the entire thing is just reenactment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very impressive, the commitment.
Yeah. So it's possible to like reenact a scene kit authentically, especially because there's just so much content that's been preserved.
Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of scene it being like in between the two worlds. It's like there's a treasure trove of like media online where you can go and see what like scene kits were like.
Yeah, you don't have to go like scanning like trade publications from the past or
Zines.
something like or any of that. No, it's all out there. Like no one's thought to take it off. A lot of times.
I mean, they did lose access to their YouTube accounts. A lot of scene queens, like they got hacked and things like that. But yeah, their videos are still largely out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how do you tell if a picture is of an OG zine kid or a like farb Zoomer reenactor? I think it's easy. There's a couple of things.
You're better at this than me, because I gotta say, I was looking through the scene subreddit, and I was like, it was actually hard to tell, because it feels like half the posts are like, here's my outfit today, and then it's also like, here's my outfit 15 years ago. Like I was so cringe. But no, so I don't have an eye for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you tips. Okay, so one thing is there's oftentimes too much of one color. This happens with many subcultures where the more people who reinterpret it over time, it gets reduced down. Like Hellsclass, for example, it had a much broader color scheme and then just ended up being black and white. With this, it's a lot of pink. If there's too much pink, it's a bad sign. Yeah. And then you should analyze the selfies. There are things you can figure out, like, it should be taken with a handheld digital camera. The camera is usually tilted. And then the photos are very close up, like part of the face is cropped out.
Oh.
Yeah,
I can see that. I'm kind of picturing like a arm in the sky downward type digital camera photo.
Yeah. There is a pretty big range, though, of the way they would take selfies, because back in the day, taking selfies was considered artistic. Not everyone did it.
Yeah, no. It was harder, too, without, like, forward-facing cameras and all that.
Yeah. Some of them would get help with them. Like, I learned, like, Kiki Cannibal, her dad actually did some of her, like, risque photo shoots.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Again, there's, like... I think that the scene core community realizes this, but there's so much to be left behind. Like you had mentioned earlier with that comment from an actual scene kit of like, like if you guys can recreate the look, but not all the like trauma that people went through.
Yeah, there's this Reddit post I'll link where someone said that they pointed to things like, they promoted unhealthy eating. They were very toxic. There was predatory behavior. They fried their hair. She says not to glorify like the golden age of scene too much, because like it's a healthier subculture these days from their perspective.
Yeah. But what these scene core kids want to do is they want to like, they kind of want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to like just purely separate the aesthetic and like none of the stuff that came with it, which is an admirable goal.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of would like it if they were a bit more outrageous.
Yeah, you do get the sense that like you're just as I said, like, there's outside subcultures and there's bedroom subcultures. You get a sense that these kids are like not leaving the house. They're not hanging out with their scene friends like at the mall. They're not doing it.
Yeah. And one more way that they're kind of misinterpreting it, their outfits are too good. The scene happened in the middle of the Great Recession. Like, you were lucky if you got a pair of Converse for Christmas, like one a year. You didn't have the ones up to your calves unless you like really saved up for it.
No. And like there wasn't like online retail wasn't what it is today, and you didn't have like super cheap Temu stuff that you could ship to your door the next day. So yeah, like you had what you could get at Hot Topic and what you could cut and modify to look more scene.
Yeah. And band t-shirts, you get them on tours, things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a bit easier now. But I miss the moments of clarity in original scene wardrobes. Like, there'd just be simple moments where it's like, oh yeah, that's just like probably a hoodie you got from your grandma. That's nice.
Yeah. No, I think there was also we kind of touched on it with like popular kids versus scene kids. This was happening at the tail end of the kind of logo prep look, and I remember myself and other kids. You'd have the swoopy hair, but you'd be wearing the Abercrombie T-shirt. Like these things kind of lived at the same time. It's funny because like when you see like scene kid content, they're like complaining at the preppies and the preps at their school. But it was all kind of mixed together. It was all sold at the same mall. The Hot Topic would be next to the Abercrombie. Like you might hit up both.
Yeah, like there was a Amber is Dead video where she is like showing her outfit on a day when she's dressed down and she's wearing a sweater. And then she's like, and look at my shoes. And then she pulls her foot up and it's Uggs. And I'm like, they wore Uggs?
Yeah. These all like, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. There were other like cultural currents at the same time.
Yeah. But yeah, it is per usual as it gets reinterpreted over time. It just gets to be like this one very strict idea, but it was much more varied at the time.
Mm-hmm. It's too pure the way that they've like remembered it and reconstructed it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this one. This was on our like podcast ideas list for a long time. But yeah, I wanted to pull this one out finally because I think we needed a fun one after our string of like historical-esque episodes.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've like made maybe the only urbanist commentary on scene kids that's been done.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good week, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.